Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yo to Bolt fam, it's the director. Chargers fans. Are you ready? Are you ready for this Week 10 matchup versus the San Francisco 49ers? I sure am, man. Can this scrappy football team pull it together and find a way to improve their record to 6-3 versus one of the toughest defenses in the league? An offense that now features Christian McCaffrey. They've also got Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. I believe that the Chargers can find a way. I do have to point out, though, guys, because I would be lying to myself if I didn't say otherwise, this is going to be a tough game on Sunday. Primetime football. We know what to expect from a Justin Herbert in that situation. But as far as the schedule is concerned, this may be the toughest defense that we play against all season long. Now, do I count the Chargers out in this one? Absolutely not. Behind Justin Herbert, anything can happen. And I do think the Chargers have a decent shot at winning this game because, again, of what the 49ers are. I can't quite put my finger on what this team is half the time. On paper, they look insane. Nick Bosa on that defense. That defense as a whole has been absolutely fantastic. The offense has just gotten so much better with Christian McCaffrey. On paper, they look absolutely fantastic. But then again, they're 4-4. And that's kind of the wishy-washy situation you're going to find as a 49ers fan, I imagine. It's like, this team is so good, but why isn't the win record on pace and on par with that? Kind of similar to what the Chargers fandom kind of feels year in, year out, does it not? But still, similar football team in terms of expectation. But at the same time, man, this is going to be one of the tougher matchups that the Chargers are going to face all season long. We're going to go over what I think the Chargers can do to hopefully win this game and improve their record. But again, it's going to be an uphill battle from, the first quarter all the way down to the fourth quarter. It should be an interesting one. Now, before we do get started, guys, shout out to our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. We're going to take advantage a little bit of what we know about this matchup. I'm already catching a little bit of flack here on Twitter. But at the same time, this is Underdog we're talking about, all right? I'm getting some flack on the Austin Ekeler lower pick than 44.5 yards. Listen, the Niners defense is insane versus the run. Does that mean I think Austin Ekeler's going to have a bad game? Absolutely not. I think Austin Ekeler's going to have a great game through the air. We got to remember how tough this football team is versus the run, and the Chargers do struggle in that department. As for the Chargers run defense, Christian McCaffrey, that's looking like a pretty good pick. I'll let you guys come to your own conclusions on that one. Make sure you guys use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100 and get in on the action. Before we kick off, guys, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action. The Chargers at 49ers, Week 10 game preview. This is going to be 4 quarters of an uphill battle, folks. But before we do get into the nitty-gritty, let's start things off like we always do with the injury report. What have the Chargers got to work with this week? What are some of the pieces we're hoping to get back? What's the timetables looking like? We'll start things off here as we have been, the past 6-7 weeks with Keenan Allen. Definitely not playing this game. He has been listed as out. And at this point, Bolt fam, I have no idea when to expect him back. That hamstring has really lingered all season long. I'm hopeful that he's just around the corner. Of course, that recovery date was weeks ago in terms of his return, and the Chargers desperately need him back at this point. Dustin Hopkins has been listed out. Brendan Hymus is going to be questionable. Trey Pipkins, that's going to be a big one, also listed as questionable. We do have some more information on that as we go along in the video. Chris Rumpf, doubtful to return this one. And then, of course, Mike Williams still out with that ankle injury. We do have news on Mike Williams, though. It does seem that he should be maybe coming back to practice next week, which does spell maybe a little bit of hope and good news for his return Week 11 versus the Chiefs. We know how good Mike Williams can be versus the Chiefs. And to round this out, let's take a look at the Niners. As of recording this video, they have not submitted their injury report on Friday, but I am reading that Eric Armstead could make his return potentially in this game. That is one that would definitely, shake Chargers fans' boots just a little bit. That's a heck of a defensive lineman and already a very good defense in his absence. Keep an eye on that one. That's one to monitor. Samson Mubakam is not practicing. Dre Greenlaw limited. Jason Verrett also. I think he was just placed on IR. I think he's going to be missing the rest of the season. Man, Chargers fans. I know we all feel for this guy, right? Such potential coming out of the draft. Of course, the Chargers being the ones that brought him in, and just could never stay healthy. A lot of potential in that player, and that narrative has not changed in so many years. So we're all hoping a quick recovery for Jason Verrett, but we're really hoping that he can change his stars in terms of his luck staying healthy. Now, with that, guys, a couple more things of news to note as far as the Chargers roster. Of course, I think a lot of people saw this on social media yesterday. Jerry Tillery has officially been waived by the Chargers. This is something that I think a lot of us saw coming from miles away. Of course, when drafted so many years ago, Chargers fans were really hopeful that he'd be that next guy to come in and really help that defensive front. It really just hasn't worked out that way. It hasn't worked out so far in terms, or I should say so much in terms of that Chargers and undrafted guys have looked a lot more impressive, including guys like Brendan Fayoko, who I do expect to step into this role sooner or later, at least maybe in this game, to try and slow down Christian McCaffrey. It just really didn't work out with Jerry Tillery. And again, I haven't been rooting against Jerry Tillery, all this time, but I did feel that this was a necessary move for the Chargers. And in the end, probably a necessary move for Jerry Tillery as well. I hope that he finds success in the next place that he goes, maybe a better scheme fit. He finds something that makes it click on a different squad. But I think for both parties, I think this was also mentioned by Sean Merriman, this was probably a necessary breakup at this point. So Jerry Tillery no longer a Los Angeles Charger. Lastly, we did get a little bit of buzz about Joey Bosa. There was a little bit of, whispers of, could we see a Bosa Bowl on Sunday? Nick Bosa versus Joey Bosa. I think at this point, it's more than likely that Joey Bosa is not going to suit up for this game. I think it's actually solidified. But we are seeing signs that Bosa could be returning sooner than later. He's been in the building. He's been rehabbing. I think there was hopes that maybe he comes off the injury report and finds himself versus the Niners in this game. But realistically, I think he's maybe a week or two away from starting to practice again. But I do know there's a lot of hopes in seeing him play versus his younger brother in San Francisco. Still something to monitor. Joey Bosa starting to trend up in terms of his return. The same thing could be said about Mike Williams and hopefully soon a Keenan Allen. We'll wrap that up here at the end of the video just for you guys to maybe expand on the hope on the horizon. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of this game. How did the Chargers possibly come away the victors in this one, improving the record to 6-3 and trying to take down one of the toughest defenses in the league? Well, let's start with the offense, actually, in San Francisco, because that unit got a huge boost a couple of weeks ago when trading for Christian McCaffrey. I knew right away when CMC was added to their roster that he was going to find a lot of success in San Francisco, because it seems that this team wants to be a running football team, and they certainly have the coaching behind it to make it a successful venture, especially with a player like CMC now on the roster. This guy was so good, as a matter of fact, that he came in, what, was it week 1 or his second week or something like that, very early in his career with the Niners, and did something that has not been done in a very long time. He scored the Triple Crown, right? A touchdown pass through the air, on the ground, and passing as well, which is insane. You guys know the last player that was able to do that so many years ago was that guy, LaDainian Tomlinson. That's how long it has been since that achievement has been found in the NFL. And he's off to a great start with the Niners, and it's going to be something the Chargers got to keep an eye on. This segment called Avoiding a CMC Disaster. Now, CMC, like I mentioned, he's going to thrive in this offense. And the Chargers, unfortunately for the Bolt fam, are a prime matchup for Christian McCaffrey. As you guys know, the Chargers' run defense has not turned out what we hoped it would be this season. Now we're going up against one of the best running backs in the NFL. Additionally, the Chargers are down Austin Johnson, who was carted off the field last week, or I should say injured last week, and we're not going to see him maybe for the rest of the season. And he was perhaps our best run-defending defensive lineman. That's a big yikes, man. In his stead, we're likely going to see a lot of Christian Covington, Brendan Fayoko, who has a lot of upside versus the run. But this is going to be a problem for the Chargers. Again, we're already the worst run defense in the NFL when it comes to yards per carry. We have got to find a way to avoid a slaughter versus a team that is very good on the ground now, featuring Christian McCaffrey, who, again, I think, in my opinion, is the all-around best running back in the league. Now, it's still very early for Christian McCaffrey. He's not been with the team very long, but at the same time, we've already seen the kind of damage he can do early in this partnership with the 49ers. I hope the Chargers don't fall victim to another big game by CMC. Next up, we got to talk a little bit about the big guy that's been the center of this offense for a couple of years, and that's going to be George Kittle. This segment called Not a Little Kittle, Baby. because I feel like maybe some people had started sleeping on George Kittle a little bit. He had been a little bit quiet to start the season off, but he's starting to look like his old self these past couple of weeks, right? 130 yards and 2 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. This is something that the Chargers are going to have to very much so pay attention to, and it's going to require a lot of attention from our star defensive player, Derwin James. And honestly, truthfully, that's going to limit what we can do on defense a little bit. I think the Chargers and some of the best success that they've had in the past couple of weeks are how they utilize Derwin James. We've seen a couple of sacks by Derwin James, disrupting the run, really utilizing him like that player we hope to see at the beginning of the offseason, that true, jack of all trades weapon on defense to properly utilize, and it's been working for the most part. But when you face against a tight end like George Kittle, Travis Kelce, even Darren Waller, it's going to limit what you can do in terms of moving Derwin James around a little bit, and that's something to keep an eye on. How do the Chargers manage this? I do feel like I trust Mike Davis, the Chargers cornerback, who's seen a very nice comeback this season in 2022, to maybe handle a little bit of that George Kittle workload. But if I were the 49ers, I would test that matchup 10 out of 10 times and see how much success I can find out of that. Still, it's something to look at. I feel like Derwin James specifically has a great shot at keeping George Kittle at a very reasonable stat line, but it also depends on how the Chargers utilize Derwin James this week. Again, I feel okay about putting Michael Davis on the assignment, but George Kittle is just yet another weapon that the Chargers got to worry about in terms of slowing down the San Francisco 49ers. Next up, this segment called Samuel versus Samuel. Can you guys guess where this is going? Deebo Samuel. I get it, man. I don't know if he's been that explosive player that I'm sure fantasy football fans were absolutely heralding last season. One of those guys that really popped onto the scene, earned himself a big contract, etc., etc. But he has been maybe a little bit less explosive on a consistent basis here in 2022. That, however, doesn't mean he doesn't have the potential to pop off, man. We've seen games and we've seen plays where Deebo looks exactly like his old self from 2021, and he has the potential to do that at any given time here in this matchup, especially considering the versatile way you can use a Deebo Samuel. It's kind of crazy to me that the San Francisco 49ers in particular are the ones that went after CMC, because in looking at Deebo and CMC, I would say they're pretty comparable, right? I would say that these guys definitely carry a lot of the same skill sets and can be utilized very uniquely, and that just creates a headache, especially for a team like the Chargers, who are already struggling on the ground. Now you got to worry about both Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel. Now, the reason that this segment is called Samuel versus Samuel is because, at least in terms of as a wide receiver, I do believe that Deebo Samuel is the best guy for the job to try and contain Deebo Samuel, right? ASJ versus Deebo, that's something I think we're going to see a lot of. But again, it really depends on how they utilize him as a running back as well. The biggest thing I love about Asante Samuel Jr., however, is his ability to close distance and get after running backs as well. And if his assignment's going to be versus Deebo, I feel like that, again, gives us the best opportunity to slow down number 19 and try and put more focus on number, 23 and Christian McCaffrey, and slowing him down. Because that's going to be the biggest main focus if you're a Chargers fan, in slowing down this Niners offense. But again, man, Asante Samuel likely see a lot of Deebo on Sunday, and that's a matchup that should be interesting to watch for Chargers fans. And again, Asante Samuel, he's been looking fantastic this season. I think he's definitely up to the challenge. Next up, I think this is the last thing in terms of the Niners offense. This segment's called Attacking the Jimmy G, okay? Garoppolo, I feel, has been very solid since taking over for Trey Lance. I know that this season is definitely, or at least was, definitely the season that a lot of Niners fans were anticipating a Trey Lance takeover, right? And I was one of those believers, especially in fantasy football, that Trey Lance could end up that guy, and he very much so still could at this point. But Jimmy Garoppolo, especially with the weapons that they've assembled in San Francisco, has really been a decent quarterback for this team, and it's one that the Chargers definitely need to try and slow down in terms of what he can do with those weapons. But the biggest thing I do want to emphasize for Chargers fans is that Jimmy G, this man is not immune to mistakes. And I think he does play into that equation of, this team looks so good, why doesn't their record reflect that? Even though, Christian McCaffrey has been, a middle of the season acquisition, I think it also has to do with something with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? He has made his share of mistakes this season, and it's one I think that the Chargers need to use as one of those angles to try and win this game. I feel the Chargers' best window to even gain any momentum may come by rattling a Jimmy Garoppolo.
And this may in turn require the Chargers to become a little brave and bold in the terms of how they attack Jimmy G this game. You got to generate some pressure. Now, of course, we're going to see a lot of Khalil Mack handed that in terms of his responsibility. Of course, that's going to be the main thing he's focused on. But the Chargers need to give him some help any way they can. And I do feel like that's why we brought up the Derwin James versus George Kittle segment. I don't know if we can afford to keep Derwin James on George Kittle every single snap this week. He's going to have to go in there and help rattle a Jimmy G, because I do feel like, I don't know. I think Derek Carr is a much worse quarterback at this point than Jimmy Garoppolo, but that same concept of as soon as you get in his head, maybe you can find a way to generate more bad decisions and possibly a turnover. That's the main thing I would focus on. That is my window as a Chargers fan this week. You've got to shake Jimmy Garoppolo at all costs, and that's going to maybe require some brave play calling on defense in terms of adding extra resources to getting to the quarterback. It's going to be much tougher this week, though, guys. I'm not going to lie. Now that he's got CMC as that safety valve receiver, a lot in the same ways that Justin Herbert has Austin Ekeler, that CMC short, yard reception can turn into a big play at any given point. So, got to be creative in that play, that part of the field. And I do feel like it's going to be something that, in terms of Brandon Staley's responsibility, that's going to be very, very tough this week in defensive play calling. Hopefully, Khalil Mack, Derwin James, Drew Tranquill, though, they can come through and they can pull through to find themselves a success versus Jimmy Garoppolo in generating that heat. All right, let's get to the Chargers side of the offense here, man. This is where things, again, especially tough versus this particular defense in San Francisco. I think a lot of Chargers fans at this point, though, will definitely agree that the offense runs through Justin Herbert and this man, Austin Ekeler. This segment called Ekeler Has to Be the Man in Week 10. And it's not going to be easy. You guys saw with my underdog selection at the top of the video, I have him under 44.5 yards. And again, that doesn't mean I think Eckler's going to have a bad day. I think he could definitely even surpass that number. But I think in terms of statistics, I would feel that he maybe generates something closer to 36, 40 yards on the ground, but that doesn't mean that he can't have a big day through the air. I think Ekeler needs to be that guy through the air this week because, again, San Francisco, they've allowed the fewest yards to running backs this season. It's going to be very tough for the Chargers to get anything going on the ground. Eckler's involvement through the passing game is going to be crucial, and I think that he's going to be one of the biggest reasons the Chargers can and maybe keep pace with the Niners now, star-studded offense in terms of what he can do as an individual player. Eckler's going to have to be able to take those short yards passes and try and find some success with that. Try to break for big plays, take those, and he's one of those guys that can definitely do it. He carries a lot of that same upside as Christian McCaffrey in terms of his receiving back, but it's going to be the week that he's going to have to pull out all the stops, man. We're going to have to find some big plays by number 30 this week. And I feel like, again, as far as his involvement on the ground, this is where it's going to become very difficult for the Chargers to find themselves as an offense this week. I know every offense in the NFL says you got to get the run game going if you're going to open up anything for the pass. That does remain a truth in this game, but I don't know how much you can really rely on the run this week. The Chargers have not been a very good running team all season long. Handing the ball off to Austin Ekeler, trying to get, tough yards through the middle just does not seem like a good idea to me. Maybe keep pushing Isaiah Spiller to produce those tough yards and keep Austin Ekeler available for those, receiving back kind of plays, those plays that feature an Austin Ekeler in the flat or something like that at all as much as possible. You want to keep him available in that situation as much as possible. Maybe give a lot of those responsibilities on the ground for tough yardage to the rookie running back in Isaiah Spiller. Because, again, it's going to be very tough. It's going to be very, very tough out there to run the ball. I feel like the Chargers do have that secret weapon, though, in Austin Ekeler that can keep him involved and keep this offense moving if necessary. Now, in terms of keeping this offense moving, what about Josh Palmer and the wideouts? Well, again, we didn't get the news that we were hoping to get this week. And, Keenan Allen miraculously is practicing again, and he's looking great, and that hamstring looks like it's old news. We're good to go. That's just not the case. That also being the same case for Mike Williams. It looks like maybe he's another week or two out. This hands the Chargers wide receiver responsibilities to the same unit that we saw last week versus the Atlanta Falcons. We got ourselves Josh Palmer, DeAndre Carter, and maybe a Michael Bandy in there. That is pretty tough, man, especially versus this Niners defense. Now, again, maybe they're a little bit more vulnerable through the air, but not by much. I think they're ranked 12th in the league as far as receiving, or I should say passing defense, and that's not much wiggle room at all. Palmer and company are going to have their work cut out for them this week again. They're facing Shavarius Ward, Jamie Ward, Talanoa Ufanga has been absolutely amazing this season. Samuel Womack has been really good this season. That Niners defensive back core, I think at the start of the season, not a lot of people gave them credit for what they would become, but they would eventually become a very solid defensive back core, and that's when the Chargers are going to really struggle working against, which again, kind of points me in the direction of our other pass catchers. I do feel like Josh Palmer is going to be very much so involved. I think you do need to stretch the field with the DeAndre Carter as much as possible. But I feel, again, our best weapon may end up being Gerald Everett, the tight end. And of course, last week definitely had some struggles. Maybe not the biggest week that we were hoping for, but that may end up being one of the better things that you can utilize on offense. And he's also going to be facing up against a tough matchup, likely in Fred Warner, who I think is one of the best linebackers in football. Either way, you're going to have to spread the ball around, try and get everybody involved, and hope that the Chargers can generate some, momentum through the air, at least maybe from their running back at the very, very least. We've seen Austin Ekeler lead this team in receptions in weeks past. I think it might be another game where we see that once again. Still, I have faith that Josh Palmer can find that Keenan Allen within himself and find a way to help the Chargers, especially on third down where they're certainly going to need it. Lastly, for the Chargers offense, this is another tough one, man. This segment called Run, Herbert, Run. Now, this is some good news first, okay? Despite the Chargers' patched up offensive line, of course, we're missing Slater. We're missing, now Trey Pipkins on that side. It's been a tough season in terms of health for the Chargers, and the offensive line is no exception. Despite all of that, though, Justin Herbert is the least sacked quarterback in 2022. I think he's only got 10 sacks on the season, which is pretty impressive considering the situation for the Chargers. But I'll tell you guys this right now. This trend will be tested on Sunday versus Nick Bosa, who has 8.5 sacks on the season already. This is especially concerning as Trey Pipkins will be a game-time decision, as we saw at the top of the episode. What do we do, Bull fam? We may see Storm Norton again on Sunday, and that's one of the Chargers' worst nightmares, right? But it also does appear that they may be trying to work away from that scenario, as they are trying to get Foster Sorrell, another backup offensive lineman, maybe some snaps on Sunday. And what's kind of funny is that in scrolling on Twitter, we did find a connection here. Of course, Foster Sorrell there in the middle of the screen. Look who's there on the far left. Jamari Sawyer. And there's some pretty good, offensive linemen all over this list. Cesar Ruiz, Wyatt Davis, Walker Little. Maybe there's some potential that Foster Sorrell goes out there and wows us. Maybe not as much as we've seen in Jamari Sawyer, but just enough to make us feel better about not having to rely on Storm Norton. Either way, I think it's going to be a tough game for Justin Herbert. That heat's going to get in there. It's going to force Justin Herbert out of the pocket. He's going to have to really turn into that quarterback that we've seen on and off again throughout the past couple of seasons that just carries the team, man. And that might be another situation that we find himself in here in Week 10 versus the Niners. He does have the capability of doing that and carrying a lot of this offense, but it's going to be tough, especially versus this defensive line. Again, one of the best in football, and that pass rushing unit is also something of note that the Chargers really have to pay attention to this week. So all this being said, my score prediction for this week is going to reflect what I feel the situation is for the Chargers in this primetime game. I got my score prediction at Chargers 26, Niners 30. Again, I don't feel that the Chargers are out in this game, but it's going to be a tough-fought matchup from the first quarter all the way down to the fourth quarter, okay? And I feel, again, the combination of facing perhaps the best all-around running back in football in Christian McCaffrey, along with the Niners' elite defense, this is extremely concerning for the Chargers. We may end up allowing a very good amount of points, which is why I got the Niners at 30 in this matchup, especially due to our porous run defense. Porous in being that we just let anybody through, man. We saw the Atlanta Falcons just run down the field. Unpunished, unchallenged. And it's going to be especially tough versus this offense that knows how to run the football. This offense is really built around it. Now they got CMC. That's concerning. But the Chargers aren't going to lay down either. I believe, and again, you're going to hear this a lot in these tough matchups, I believe that Justin Herbert, especially in prime time Sunday night football, will evolve into his Super Saiyan form, right? In the second half especially. That Super Saiyan Justin Herbert that we've seen so many times throughout his short career so far. Even with the lack of weapons, I think that Herbert's going to find a way. And he is the reason that I am in no way counting the Chargers out of this one. Of course, the Niners kind of up and down. They're looking on the upward trend, as I think very passionately by a lot of Niners fans and even general NFL fans. They're on the upward trend trajectory, absolutely. But you can never count the Chargers out because of Justin Herbert, who is healing up. He's playing like his old self, and he has the capability to carry this offense if necessary. And this game's really going to come down to if Herbert and his ability to overcome the impossible. It all comes down to number 10. But it's going to be a constant uphill battle. I've got this game within 1 score for the Bolts. And if they can avoid disaster in the first quarter, especially where we see the Chargers really, struggling to generate points like we've seen in weeks past, maybe they can find a way to keep it close in the fourth quarter. But if they can't find a way to hit the ground with some momentum, I fear that the Niners may play just a very, long 4-quarter game of keep away while taking that lead. Chargers got to come off the ground. They have to come off the ground running. They got to come in hot, and they got to find a way to score in the first quarter. They cannot drag their feet this week because that defense is going to punish you for the remainder of this game. You got to have something ready in your back pocket, Joe Lombardi especially, to score very quickly. Now, lastly, I almost never do this. I think this may be the first time I've ever done this. It's a bonus segment here, okay, in this video. Bonus segment. Call in the cavalry, okay? This game could end up being a tough one, and I would be lying to you guys if I said otherwise. This is going to be a tough game. But hope really is on the horizon, okay? With Mike Williams potentially returning next week, we're hopeful that he's going to begin practicing early next week. It marks step 1 of a Chargers comeback, okay? Bosa and Keenan, those guys could be around the corner in terms of their return. Keenan may be a little bit more sketchy, but Bosa's been back in the building rehabbing, and he's looking pretty good. Heck, even Rashawn Slater can make a late season appearance and return if we find ourselves, postseason bound. Either way, this scrappy football team, which I've been calling in these past couple of weeks, they've found their way to 5-3 at this point of the season, despite all of the injuries. If they can somehow find a way to enter week 12, right? So we're in week 10 now. If they can enter week 12, it's 6-4, right after week 12. There's a shot that their postseason hype could be justified with the return of their star players. Joey Bosa, Keenan Allen, those are huge difference makers. This defense looks dramatically different when Joey Bosa is lined up opposite Khalil Mack. This offense looks dramatically different when Keenan Allen is lined up out there and Mike Williams. These returns could be around the corner. And again, it's going to be tough. This scrappy football team's going to have to find a way to survive. But if they can survive maybe 1 out of these next 2 weeks, I'm hopeful that that's going to buy them just enough time to right the ship as we get deeper into the second half of the schedule. You guys let me know in the comment section below. Let me know what you guys' score prediction is for this one. The biggest things that you guys think we have to watch out for defensively as well as offensively, and maybe the biggest key factor that the Chargers need to bring into effect to try and win this game. It's going to be a tough game, guys, but we're going to be there together. Sunday Night Football live stream. Always thousands of football fans, Chargers fans in the chat. It's going to be a fun experience. Win or lose, we're going to be out there cheering on our Bolts. And if anything, we're going to sit back and have fun with it, guys. That's all I can tell you as a Chargers fan. Enjoy it. It's football. It's our hobby. It's something that we all feel very passionate about. But in the end, if we can't have fun with it, what's the point? We'll be having fun with it on Sunday night as we view that primetime matchup. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you enjoyed what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. And as always, yes, bolt up. We are repping the Bolts day in and day out. And stay frosty. Gotta find a way to stop Christian McCaffrey, man. That's going to be a big point of this game.